Oh my God. So nothing new, hey?
No.
Not because of today. Oh, we're live.
We're live. Hello, everyone. Hi, I'm Bridie. I'm one of the nurse advisors here at MS. Welcome to our Facebook Live session today. So today we're going to try and address anxiety during COVID. So in my role, I've been receiving many calls from clients and families exhibiting high levels of anxiety during COVID and lockdown, particularly related to healthcare access, vaccinations, immunosuppression, and COVID risks. So today I am honoured to introduce you to the lovely Sally Shaw, who is a psychologist working with many of our clients who have MS. And Sally has kindly offered to provide some insight and some tips to help you through these troubled times. Welcome, Sally.
Hey, Bridie. Thank you. What a lovely introduction. And thank you for having me, because I'm absolutely thrilled to be talking about the ever-changing situation that we find ourselves in, right? Like, you've introduced it with such a great spread of all the things that have been worrying, or some of the things that have been worrying people with MS and the broader community since when? March last year. And, you know, when we think back to last year, Bridie, how this could have been something we did at this time last year when we were opening back up, and we never really thought 21 would bring this. And here it is.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, who would have thought we'd still be here? Hey, my anxiety, I turn myself pink, purple and blue, you know, to colour my world. But I'm sure that's not one of the tips that you're going to give. But let's launch into a few things that I'm hoping will be really valuable for our listeners today. So, Sally, is it normal to feel anxious at this time? And how do we know if this is a reactive anxiety or if we actually need to get some professional help?
Yes, great question, because I think everybody is struggling with their own emotional response to this. And as you've indicated in the intro, Bridie, like, what have we had to deal with? And I think to begin with, it was around that sense of personal risk about getting COVID, one of the many things, but that sense of personal risk. And for people with MS, it was elevated because they knew that they have the, you know, prior health conditions. And we kept hearing about that in the news, and how people with other ongoing health issues would maybe fare worse than those others in the community. So the risk and the stress around that was high from the get-go. But we've also had to cope with so many other things that have brought with them strong emotional responses. So that reactive anxiety has happened because of COVID risk, because of lockdowns, because of employment issues, because of financial concerns, because of social changes, you know, not being able to see our families and friends for those of us in the locked down areas. Don't get me started on homeschooling, Bridie, because you and I have already talked about the fact that I'm very excited come Friday. My kids are back. But this plethora of challenges that we have faced have brought with them strong emotional responses. And that's where I think we should start that definition. We're human beings, and we are meant to have emotions, particularly when we're faced with things that are novel and new and unexpected and full of uncertainty. So for us to have emotional responses to that is normal. So that's a big message for today. It is very normal, very human, that's probably a better word, very human to have all of the emotions. And the emotions that people are talking about are, of course, anxiety and feeling unease and nervousness, but they're also feeling overwhelmed, and they're feeling frustrated and angry and snappy and sad and sometimes happy, you know, all of the emotions. We're all on a roller coaster. So for me, we need to be aware that having some reactive anxiety is actually just human. And the big message there is it's uncomfortable. Nobody wants to have anxiety. Nobody wants to feel overwhelmed or flat or horrible. But unfortunately, it's a normal part of what we're going through, and it's uncomfortable. So then we step to the next bit that you were talking about. How do we register when it's not reactive? Is that right?
Yeah. And you know, do we need to get some help for that, Sal? You know, what do we do about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there are some big red flags for me when I'm talking to somebody to try and figure out, is this somebody responding to a very unique situation that's uncomfortable, or is this somebody that needs a little bit more attention? Is this somebody that's presenting something that is diagnosable as generalized anxiety disorder maybe, or clinical depression, and can be offered further treatment? And I look at a few different measures, and one of them is how comfortable somebody is feeling about it. How worried are they about their emotional responses? It's really important to ask the person, rather than just ticking a checklist. Do they feel like this is a normal response, or do they feel like this is happening at times where they feel that it's very unexpected? And is it happening for, everybody says, I had an off day. I had a day where I just sat on the couch and cried. I had a day where I hid in the kitchen and ate chocolate in the pantry. I had a day where I couldn't have a conversation with anybody. I had a day where I couldn't get out of bed. Everybody has had those days in the last 2 years. I think you would agree, Bridie.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. And I think that, unfortunately, for all of us, is normal. That's just okay, unfortunately. Uncomfortable, but okay. If you are having those moments repeatedly, if you are having more of those moments than not in any given week or in a fortnight, if you are finding that your thoughts and your feelings are uncomfortable and intrusive and are impacting on your ability to function, if you can't have a conversation about anything else, if you can't engage in work or care of yourself, self-care practices or care of your kids, then certainly that is not normal. That's not a response that we want you to grin and bear. That is something where definitely, as you said, Bridie, we should be promoting that people reach out, and maybe even a little before that, reach out, take some steps to get some extra support, like from a psychologist or a counsellor.
And would that also apply to, like, if a family member notices that your mood has changed or these behaviours have changed? So, I guess it's important that there's some communication going on within that family unit to express, look, I've noticed that, you seem to be a little bit flat, or you have these going on, and, what can we do about that?
Yes, absolutely. And I think I hope that as a society, we've stepped up because of the coronavirus situation the last 2 years, but also I think the messaging around the Are You OK Day has also increased in people's psyches to feel maybe a little more able to say to a loved one or a friend or even somebody that they work with, hey, I've noticed exactly what you said. I've noticed that, you're appearing a little different, maybe a little flat. Do you want to talk about it? Is there anything, we can do together? I think it's a great idea to always talk about it, Bridie. Surprise, surprise, as the psychologist. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great, Sally. So I guess if let's say the clients can't get into a psychologist or a counsellor,
Yes.
and we know that at the moment it is a little bit more difficult to access some of these services, what can they do to help with their anxiety in the interim?
Yeah. I would also like to acknowledge that point. It is really hard to get into psychological support at the moment. And I think if people that are listening today feel as though they're on that border between, well, this is a normal reaction that I'm having to a really unusual event, and I guess it's okay because I'm human, but I'm a little bit worried about it, and maybe I might need some support down the track, I would be encouraging those people to find the name of a psychologist and just book something in. You'll be on the waiting list for 6 to 8 weeks anyway, and there is no harm in 6 to 8 weeks when you are feeling so much better. Just cancel, make the appointment, know that it's there a couple of days beforehand. If you don't need it, cancel it. And maybe some psychologists won't like me saying that, but I think we don't want to let it get to a point where we are in crisis mode and we cannot see anybody for 3 months. So if you feel like you need it, just take some proactive steps now, and hopefully you won't need it. Better safe to be sorry type of approach. But to your point, there are other things we can do in the interim. And there are certainly some techniques and some strategies that we can all use, whether you have anxiety or not, whether you have MS or not. If you are somebody that has ever experienced an emotion, a thought, something that is uncomfortable, that you don't like, then I think you can follow a few steps that I'll outline, but also the wonderful people that are working somewhere behind us, Bridie, in another world, in the cloud somewhere, are going to post a link in the comments below to you know what I'm going to say, to Russ Harris's article. And Russ Harris, if anybody has heard of this name, you might have read his book, one of his books called The Happiness Trap. There's another one called The Reality Slap. They're great books. They're based in a particular therapy called ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy. I think they work really well. That style of therapy works really well for people with chronic health conditions like MS, but also for people who are living in uncertain times. And so Russ Harris wrote a piece on how to cope with anxiety during COVID. So that's in the comments below. I would love for people to click on it, download a copy. It's a PDF of maybe 6 pages or 4 pages, I'm not sure. But his basics are some of the terms or some of the strategies that I wanted to go through today, Bridie, around number one, if you're feeling a little anxious, or as I say, a mood or an emotion that's a bit uncomfortable and you're a bit sick of it, you're a bit over it, then number one, you'd be able to tell me, Bridie, number one is to just focus on what you have control over. And we have, Bridie and I, I'm sure, have spent a fair amount of time in the last 18 months talking to people about this exact topic. What do you have control over? Because we can't control the numbers of COVID. We can't control the numbers of vaccine. That's right. Us personally as little human beings, what do we have control over? And when we are in a moment of heightened anxiety, one of the best things we can do is bring it right back to where we are literally sitting or standing in space and examining, what do I have control over in this moment to focus on? We have spent a lot of time, haven't we, Bridie, talking to people who are on the constant 24-hour news channels?
Yeah.
Have you come across a few people that are overwhelmed?
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
we've never lived in a time where there has been so much information at our fingertips, or like we all get the alerts on our phones in the morning to tell us how many cases we've got in our region. And maybe it's a good idea to turn those alerts off. So the first action, I think, is really to focus on what's in your control. And it involves dealing with both our internal world and our external world. So are we in control of difficult thoughts and feelings? And are we in control of the problems that we are faced with, the challenges that are in our external environment? And often we don't have much control over those external environments. So we want to start talking to ourselves about, how much control do I have over these uncomfortable thoughts and feelings? So number two in this little strategy is around acknowledging the thoughts and feelings that we're having at the time when we feel really uncomfortable. Now, this is kind of counterintuitive to a lot of people, because if I'm feeling anxious about something and I know I can't control it, my go-to, Bridie, is stop thinking about it. Don't be silly. Stop worrying about it. You know, why would you pay that? It's just stop it. Now, the problem with that approach, and I hope other people can relate, the problem with that approach is that if I just dismiss a thought that's worrying me, or dismiss an emotion that I'm feeling that's uncomfortable, it's like my mind says, oh, well, she doesn't want to think about it now, but I'll make sure I remind her to think about it and worry about it later. So my mind will continually give it back to me as something that should be considered to keep myself safe. So my mind is like, oh, you don't want to think about it now? That's okay. I'll bring it up tonight just before you go to sleep so you can worry about it then. And we don't want that to happen, because then all of our worries come up at the times when we really can't have them come up at 3 a.m. So it's the step that Russ Harris suggests we do, and ACT therapy suggests we do, is just to acknowledge, take a moment to, Russ says, silently acknowledge the thoughts that you're having and the feelings that are uncomfortable. I'm not such a silent person, Bridie, as you might have noticed. And so I actually don't mind saying it out loud. I will find myself saying, I'm noticing that I'm feeling really overwhelmed, and I'll say it while I'm doing the dishes, and my kids look at me a little bit strangely, and my husband just is used to me talking to myself. But another option for people could be to write it down. Just to write down, you know, I'm feeling overwhelmed, and when I feel overwhelmed, I notice that. So we use this kind of language. I'm noticing that I feel really overwhelmed. I'm noticing that I can feel it because my breath is a little bit like this, and my heart's racing, and I can't sit still. And writing that down is a really crucial second step, because then we can remind ourselves that this thinking and feeling is up here. It's kind of out here, and it is all consuming. But actually, what I'm doing is sitting in my kitchen, doing the dishes. I could be thinking about what to cook for dinner, but instead I'm letting myself get carried away with this big kind of anxiety response. So something we can do at that point is to remind ourselves to come back into our body. Sounds a bit out there. Come back into your body. Think about your feet. Where are your feet? Okay, they're on the ground, or my bum is in the chair. I can feel myself sitting in this chair in this room. I can offer my mind a moment to remind itself that actually we are not frontline workers trying to, quash the number of COVID cases. I am just in my kitchen doing the dishes. So for me, I need to bring my thoughts back to what is within my control. And the best way we can do it. Sorry, were you going to say something, Bridie?
No. This is very interesting, Sally. I'm really keen to hear what you're going to say here.
Well, the next part is the action part, which I think is the easiest strategy for people to grab hold of. It's really important that we don't skip the strategy of acknowledging thoughts and feelings, because otherwise they just come back all the time. So if we can write them down and try and acknowledge them with kindness, then the next step is to choose our next action, choose our next behavior, and engage in it thoroughly, engage in it completely. So I tend to think that our thoughts and our feelings are largely out of our control. Nobody ever sits down, and this is going there, but nobody ever sits down and says, I think now what I'm going to do is think about the number of COVID cases rising and how if they get really high and then I get COVID, how they might not have a ventilator for me at the hospital. Nobody says, I'm going to sit down and think about that. But for a lot of people, that thought just happens. The catastrophic thinking happens, the anxiety goes skyrocketing, and emotions come with it directly. There's no choice. It just happens. However, we have a lot of control over our actions. So not much control over thoughts and emotions in this example, great control over actions. So is a good action to sit in front of the news and keep listening to the numbers? To alleviate the uncomfortable thoughts and feelings? No, that action is not going to offer us any relief. But our actions can be dramatic improvers of thoughts and emotions if we change our environment. Like the best example, I think, is going from a warm, cozy lounge room watching TV to standing up or rolling outside and getting the cold air, the sun on your face, or the wind through your hair, and to feel a snap out of your environment. So to really change your physical location and to engage in an activity. So an activity that I suggest to people is to go touch a tree, put your hands in the soil, get your shoes off, put your feet on the ground. That's a bit out there too, but it can be one of the strategies that we hear about all the time. Change your physical location and say to yourself, what is something that I can see? Or what are 3 things I can see? What are 2 things I can hear? What is something I can smell? And the most important part of this exercise, Bridie, is to recognize that it's not get it done as quick as you can. So I've worked with people that say, I went outside and I said, I saw a tree and a dog and a letterbox, and it didn't do anything for me. And I think, well, fair enough, that wouldn't do anything for me either. But the point is that this is the strategy in which we have to practice and work. So the benefit comes from when we go outside and we are actively offering our mind something else to consider, and in an attempt to allow it to change our emotions. So if I go outside and I say, well, I see a tree, that's not going to make me feel any less anxious. But if I go outside and I say, okay, what can I notice about the tree? I could notice that the leaves have come up a whole lot more quickly than I expected through spring. I can notice that there are some leaves that have water on them. I can notice that I see the sun come through and it casts some shade in a different direction. I can notice that my dog is over there wagging her tail, and boy, does she smell. Like these are things that if we say it out loud, or if we really pay attention, we can offer our mind something else to think about and slowly find our thoughts and our emotions shifting, even just slightly, to get them out of the very catastrophic, uncomfortable point. Oh, it's a lot, but it can be done.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Mm.
And I think I might have a look at some of that Russ Harris stuff
Yeah,
myself. I
good.
think,
Yeah, click on it and have a look at the link.
yeah, I will. Because, like, a lot of the things that you're saying, I can see will absolutely benefit our clients and the families, but would benefit so many other people as well. So
Yes.
thank you, Sally. That's beautiful.
Great.
Now, I'm going on to something here. So I've heard many clients reporting conflicting and challenging views about the vaccine, COVID, and MS management. And in this changing world, it's changing all the time. I have a terrible job trying to keep on top of what's happening on a regular basis, people ringing in and asking questions and trying to keep abreast of what's going on.
Yeah.
But what would be your advice to manage this as we work on the roadmap out of COVID and our restrictions? And what would your top tips be to actually get through this?
Yeah. I'll try to keep it brief, Bridie, because I know we've only got, 10-ish minutes before we finish up. But I think that it is one of the great examples of a new world of us as we are coming out. And obviously we're talking mostly for people, New South Wales, but Victoria, we're coming out of lockdowns now, and it is a whole new world. And one of the things that we've noticed is that people are quite apprehensive about not only coming out into this brand new world, but also having discussions and conversations with people who have differing opinions. And I think that the advice from me around that, because they're big ones, aren't they, Bridie? They're about vaccinations. Largely I'm hearing, my sister-in-law doesn't believe or does believe, just has an opposing view to me, and I'm finding that difficult. People are trying to navigate, what does Christmas look like if there are people with different opinions about how that should be managed? Should we stick to smaller numbers? Should we have big massive parties? Just because we're allowed to doesn't mean that everybody's comfortable in doing that. So I'm finding that, I guess my top tips around that would be to, I'll state the boring one first, the boring one that we all know. Find your trusted source of information to provide you with advice on your own setting. Is it the GP, the neurologist? Is it your MS nurse or the MS nurses at MSL? Is it, trusted people that have your best interests in heart and know your situation, your individual situation? Listen to them and then go from there. I think the second one is to really think about this word compassion, compassion for yourself. And as we come out and as we change the landscape yet again, find the compassion and turn it inward for self-compassion. But also it's really important for us to be compassionate when we're talking to other people. And that's hard when we all have such strong opinions on certain things. But it's really important that we keep open minds, even when, this is a big one, even when we don't think other people are being open-minded. It's important for us to have an open mind. And I think it's important to know what you want out of this conversation that you're about to have with someone. If you're finding particular conversations difficult or particular people difficult, before you talk to them, Bridie, have a think about, what do I want? What is my success criteria for this meeting with this person, the sister-in-law or the mother-in-law or the friend or the colleague that has a different opinion? Because the success criteria can be either, I'm going to win this argument, or I want to maintain a healthy relationship here. And I just don't think we should be aiming to win arguments at the moment. I think we should be enlisting all of the self-compassion and the compassion for others and maintaining relationships, even if it means we have a little bit of a changed relationship for a little while, even if it means we have a little break from some people, if they have opinions or views that are conflicting with ours. I think it's important for us also, as the last point, to not convince ourselves that we know what our decisions will be in 2 weeks from now or in 3 weeks or 3 months from now, because we don't have the information that we are going to need to base those decisions on yet. We will have that information in 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks. And if we know anything around coronavirus, particularly in the the eastern states, we know that everything changes all the time. So one of my friends might have a particular oppositional view to me now, but in 2 months or in 3 months, we might actually find that we're not so dissimilar in our thinking. And we need to be mindful of that.
Yeah. So, Sally, I'm actually aware that a lot of our clients, or anyone really, we already have skills that we can draw on. So,
Yes, we do.
yeah, what sort of comments can you make about that to help
Yeah.
sort of latch onto those and help ourselves?
Yeah. How interesting was it, Bridie, when that all started in March and April last year, and people were
Mm,
so uncertain and so scared, and people
yeah.
with MS were like, oh,
Mm,
so this is other people experiencing uncertainty, and people with MS were
mm,
like, just hold my beer, I'll show you how it's done,
mm,
because they had dealt so well with uncertainty for so long.
yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
people with MS are a great example of people who are able to dig deep and say, what have been my coping strategies to deal with uncertain times in the
Yeah.
past? And I think, interestingly, a lot of people at the start of the pandemic were saying, but my coping strategy is social support. And now I'm really lacking that because they weren't able to connect with their friends in a way that they're used to. And then now I'm seeing much more of the other, flip the coin, and the other side of people saying, but my coping strategy, as an introvert was to have time for myself and to make sure I carve out quiet time. And now they're at home, working from home with their partner, working from home, and 3 kids under 10, all homeschooling, and they're going nuts.
Mm,
So
mm,
we've had a lot of our coping strategies taken away from us, but we can
mm,
also look at, I think, some of the main ones are the coping strategies that we have incorporated into our habits, into our routines. Is it exercise? Is it chatting with a friend, even if it's not face to
mm,
face? Is it using problem-focused coping strategies like what's within my control? I can adhere to the health guidelines. I can wear a mask. I can keep myself safe. I can go for a run. I can get tested, if I need
yeah.
to. Or some of those emotion-focused coping strategies, which are more about talking about things or listening to music, doing things that make you feel more positive or happier in life, are really important. It's really important for us to have a balance and to identify the joy, identify the moments that we're grateful for. So looking back on all of those tried and true
Mm,
techniques, just as you
mm,
said, is really important. I think as the final points, Bridie, that I would want to make would be around examining your own coping strategies. What's worked
yeah.
well for you before, and what do you have control over? Sticking to a routine is really important.
Mm,
Keep it going,
mm,
particularly the exercise stuff and the gratitude stuff. Be kind to
mm,
yourself. Be kind to other people. Notice your thoughts and feelings, and then act in ways that can offer your mind a release from things that might be overwhelming. So
yeah.
engage fully in behaviors that will bring you some relief,
Mm,
and talk to someone. Of course, I'm going to say this, Bridie, talk to someone if you feel like you might just want a little helping hand to get your thoughts in order. If you are interested in knowing whether you should be accessing a little bit more professional support, talk to
mm.
someone. And I think that you might be able to tell us, Bridie, a little bit about the role of MS nurses and how people can call you if they need some support.
Absolutely. So Jane, my colleague, and I welcome calls from anyone struggling with anxiety. So,
Good.
yes, we are nurses, we're not psychologists, but we have great empathy and
Yeah.
great skills in listening to your story.
Mm.
And sometimes we can actually identify other factors that could be fueling your anxiety, such as poor sleep, fatigue, pain, or even, continence
Mm.
issues. There's so many things that can be fueling your anxiety that's behind the scene. So we're able to actually advise how or where to access help to improve the symptoms for a start. And that may actually help your anxiety levels as a result of just having that conversation. And the other side of this is sometimes just talking to someone who understands the disease and can provide
Mm.
some reassurance
Yep.
is alone a strategy to manage your anxiety. As you've been saying, talk to
Mm.
someone.
Yes.
So this is our role, and
Mm.
so please don't hesitate to call MS Connect on the number on the screen and ask to be scheduled into our calendars. We
Mm.
are very passionate about the work that we do, and very, um, open to conversation about absolutely everything. And if we're a really good starting point into, moving forward and helping you, that's what we're here for. So please call us.
So does that mean, Bridie, that people can basically make appointments with you to just have a
Yeah,
moment to talk about concerns or challenges or just get some? That's fantastic.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So basically, call MS Connect. The girls will schedule you into my calendar or Jane's calendar, whoever's
Great.
available. And usually we can spend a good half hour or so having a chat. And if we felt that we needed to continue that conversation, or there's some more stuff that we need to go into, it's at our discretion whether we sort of, make another time to have another call. But generally, it's sort of a once-off conversation, but it can be so valuable.
That's so good. And not just for issues about disease-modifying therapies. It's not just about the medication that you're there, Bridie.
No,
People can call you for lots of different
no.
things. That's great.
Yeah.
Mm.
We're sort of open to talk about absolutely anything, and
Great.
it's amazing when you're actually talking to someone and you start to develop a bit of a rapport with them,
Yes.
how you can sort of open the conversation and you actually realize that there's a lot more going on behind the scenes that you can sort of pad out and start to work on. And sometimes I often talk about the interplay of symptoms, and as you know, Sally, our mental health and physical health directly impact each other.
Yep,
And
absolutely.
so, we kind of all work together, and it might be that we suggest that you go and see a counsellor or a psychologist around some of the mental health strategies and how to
Yep.
do that. But it's that initial conversation with someone who has an understanding of what could be going on is just so invaluable, and we hear
It
this quite
is.
frequently. So please
Yeah.
utilize this. That's what we're here for.
It's wonderful
So
service.
yeah, so
Mm.
I guess we're kind of running out of a bit of
I
time,
know. It's been great
Sally.
to talk to you, Bridie.
It's been an absolute joy, and I really thank you, Sally, for your wise words and
Thank
time.
you.
It's always inspiring to listen to you speak.
Oh,
You're
thanks,
an
Bridie.
amazing asset to this world. And
Thanks.
for all our
Oh,
listeners, you really are.
thanks.
And
Yeah.
to all our listeners, may you all
Yes,
stay well and safe out there. Take care. And
indeed.
I hope that I get to speak to you over the phone.
Yes,
Take
call
care.
Bridie and Jane. Call them both.
Yes,
Thank you,
of course.
Bridie.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye, everyone.